Thank you for tuning in to this special episode of Movie Geeks United. The 12th annual Sunscreen Film Festival takes place in St. Petersburg, Florida, from April 27th to the 30th. Movie Geeks United is honored to be associated with this festival, which consistently delivers an exceptional caliber of independent films and a fervid love of all things cinema. You can read more about this year's festivities by visiting sunscreenfilmfestival.com. In this episode, we'll explore 3 titles which are premiering at the fest. First up, we're joined by director Michael Mailer and actor Dylan McDermott as they discuss their collaboration titled Blind. The film features Alec Baldwin as a novelist who's blinded in a car accident that also takes the life of his wife. He falls in love with Demi Moore, who plays the wife of an indicted businessman played by McDermott. The son of acclaimed novelist Norman Mailer, Michael enjoys his feature directorial debut with Blind, although he has produced a string of popular films for over 20 years. Blind isn't the only project on McDermott's docket during the festival. He's also premiering a web series that he wrote and directed titled Sugar. Yeah, I'm curious to know, because you've been a long-time producer. You've produced a lot of great projects, including several with a guy that we're all crazy about on the show, James Toback.
Yeah.
Why did you choose for this project in particular to be your directorial debut?
Well, I mean, my brother wrote it. I developed it with him many years ago, with the intention of producing it, and it had a number of incarnations with different directors and different cast, and always found a way not to get made last second, which tends to happen on certain film projects. To a point where I just sort of put it away about 3 or 4 years ago. I just figured it was, going to collect dust for infinity. And then a couple of years ago, I was on the set of a movie I was producing, a great film called Friends and Romans, and I just, I had a very odd reaction to being on set. I mean, normally I'm the producer who's very hands-on, and I enjoy being on set, but and this had nothing to do with the movie itself. I just hit a creative wall and became allergic to being on set, and decided, I had to really do something differently, certainly on a creative level, and decided then I was going to direct a film, and naturally, the one project I knew so well inside and out was Blind, and I figured that was, if I was going to do it, that was the project to put my hands on.
Yeah, and you've got such a exceptional cast that you've assembled, in Alec Baldwin and Demi Moore, and of course Dylan. And Dylan, when you read the script, what about it spoke to you, and about the character that you play in particular?
I had like a primal reaction. I was doing a play. My agent sent me the script, and I was like, oh man, I love this so much, because I grew up with those guys, and I know those guys in New York, and I understand them, and I also understood the criminal aspect of Mark. So I just sometimes with acting, you have these roles that you understand so well. Sometimes you have to do research, and sometimes you have to figure out who the character is. I didn't have to do that with this character. I knew exactly what motivated him. I knew exactly where he lived. What made him the hungry person that he is for power. So I just had this visceral reaction, and I knew I had to do it, and I met with Michael, and we seemed to be on the same page, and he trusted me enough to do it, and we had a great time working on it. We just had that simpatico, and we're all making the same movie, and that, I know it seems like an easy thing to say, but that it rarely happens when everybody's in the same movie, and that's what happened with Alec, Demi, and I, and Michael.
Yeah. Well, in essence, the movie is a romantic drama, but does it? What do you think, Michael? It's saying about the thirst for wealth and power and that kind of dynamic.
Well, I mean, the movie definitely speaks to, as Dylan put it, certain character types that very much, live in certain circles. I mean, New York City clearly being, the epicenter of it. And, I always find those characters particularly compelling because they're constantly on the hunt for higher plateaus of self-aggrandizement, and of course, once they get there, they got to find the next peak, and in that process, their pathology, their psychopathy, if you will, becomes more and more prominent. The more they are unable to ultimately satiate their thirst. And I find that kind of erosion of ethical behavior that results from it just to be kind of a fascinating subject and characters. And Dylan really brought so much to that role. I mean, they're not. He humanized a very bad guy, basically, and like all bad guys, they also have good sides to them, and nothing is ever black and white; it's gray. And so that, when you have the ability to bring that kind of nuance to a role, which Dylan did bring, it just makes those characters so compelling to watch. I mean, you just can't take your eyes off of them. And, I think the proof is in the pudding on this one.
Yeah. And Dylan, was that a particular challenge or the great thrill of the role was to bring that kind of humanity to it?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're playing someone bad, you don't play bad. You actually, what I do is I try to look for the good, and in looking for the good, more bad comes out. Funny enough, but I really felt that when playing playing bad, always look for the good, because it's so easy to be arch in these roles, to play bad, to be bad, but he had specific motives, and I think that it's really a metaphor for of capitalism in the world, how people have lost their way. Capitalism has taken over the world in many ways, and it's quite frightening to see that people will do anything for money, and we see that more and more. We see it, in the news every single day, and there's no apology for it anymore. There used to be like a moral compass, and that's sort of like when Oliver Stone made Wall Street, there was sort of like this moral compass of Gordon Gekko, and I think that's sort of like passé now. It's like that become Gordon Gekko is sort of like the norm now for a lot of these guys, and it's frightening to me to watch it up close, and also in Hollywood as well. It doesn't matter. This morality seems to be escaping us over and over again. So what I love about the film is that we're speaking to that morality, that somehow it still exists in this movie, that we're at least searching for it, and that's why we're commenting on it a little bit and bringing some awareness and attention to it, which I think is great.
Well, I mean, you've done the big epic studio action movies, and you've done your share of independent films as well, like this one.
Yeah.
And I would imagine that. It seems to me from the outside that studios aren't willing to take a bet on a $10 to $30 million movie. They only want $200 million bets. The higher the stakes, the more they want in. Mm-hmm. And I think I think we lose a lot as an audience and a culture without a steady diet of movies about people, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm sure Michael would agree, the best movies are still from the 70s.
Yeah.
Those movies were the greatest movies ever made because the studio system had failed at that time, and they let the directors take over, and the directors had a vision of the world, and they kind of like made all these incredible movies because the studios left them alone. But I'm afraid those days are, far gone now. And so we rely on independent movies. I mean, look at a Moonlight that won the Oscar last year for Best Picture. That movie cost $1.5 million to make. A small independent movie with no stars in it, and it resonated. So I think there is an audience for it, but the smaller movies have a harder time. They need to have film festivals. They need to have the critics behind it. They need to get some buzz behind it for them to make it.
And Michael, how?
Yeah, go ahead.
Please go ahead.
No, I was just saying, Dylan is right. To me at least, the most interesting movies are the films where the story comes out of the character and not the other way around. When you're making a $200 million movie, you really, with rare exceptions, you've got to create the lowest common denominator, and in that process, in appealing to a vast audience, you really end up diminishing, any sense of character that doesn't sort of neatly fit into the strictures of your plot, and that's why indie films are so important, more so now than ever, because we're either living in the Marvel universe or we're living in the universe of character-driven films, and it's a very stark dichotomy.
And as a longtime producer, I mean, in one sense, there are more platforms to get your film in front of eyeballs today than ever before, with streaming and that sort of thing. But at the same time, is it more difficult than ever before to find financing for these smaller films?
Yes, it hasn't gotten easier. I'll put it to you that way. I mean, just from an economic standpoint, the DVD model really kind of drove the industry, for decades, and really sort of coinciding with the financial collapse in 2008, the DVD engine kind of sputtered out, and in its place, the digital revolution has helped a bit, but it really hasn't caught up yet to what the DVD universe offered, which was basically a backstop against these little movies. And so I find that the budgets are getting smaller, not bigger. And you really need to find actors, of the quality of the Dylan McDermotts, who are willing to say, you know what, I'm just going to take a flyer on this film, on this character, because it's really interesting. It appeals to me artistically. It's not about the money; it's just about the art. It's about the work. And but not that many actors really have that mentality. It's like once they start making money, they don't want to lose that momentum, and it's so we're all sort of scrambling for the same limited resources, basically.
Well, I'm curious about the nature of working in independent films like this. I mean, Dylan, I mentioned earlier that you've been in many big films, but it obviously with independent films, there's usually a tight schedule involved.
What do we shoot this in, Michael? Was it 21 days? Do we have that? It was 20 days in New York, and then we had a day and a half in France. Yeah, that's the typical nowadays. Is about 21 days to make a smaller movie.
So does it, as for you as an actor, does that give you a kind of energy, because you can't afford to spend a whole day on a moment like you might be able to do on a much bigger budgeted film?
Yeah, I've learned, because doing so much television, I just come prepared and ready to go. I don't try to, you find moments when you're obviously working on a movie, but I just try to come fully prepared, because I know we only have a certain amount of time to get it done in a day. You have only a certain amount it takes to do it, so it's really up to me, because as an artist, I have to go in and hit it hard, because I know that there's a time crunch every single day. And television really helped me with that, because in television, you're doing 10 pages a day. So when you do a movie, with Blind, I think we probably did 3 or 4 pages a day. But nonetheless, it gave me a good work ethic in terms of go in, your lines, your character, you go in and you get it done, because there's just no time to fool around.
Having come out of the producing side of things, doing indie movies, it is about the preparation. I mean, there's a saying that a movie is made in pre-production, and by that, it's all about being prepared. And and dealing with very tight schedules and sort of knowing what you want. That being said, obviously you things inevitably evolve on set, and you've got to be willing and open to the fact that it's a collaborative process, and points of view are going to come up, and suggestions that you might not have thought of that in many cases can turn out to be really helpful to the film. But you don't. I mean, I wonder sometimes what I would do if I had unlimited, amounts of time and resources to shoot a film.
Yeah.
It's a luxury that's beyond my comprehension.
Yeah, and at the same time, I hear from a lot of people that it's not. It probably fosters more creativity in a way when you have a limited budget. I mean, everyone wants more money, but because that whatever problem you run into, you can't just throw money at it. So it forces you to find a more creative solution, possibly.
That's absolutely right. And there's something that just comes out of compression. I mean, gold, diamonds, they're all created by, the pressure and compression of plates moving, underground. And in certain ways, creativity can really, you can really create some interesting stuff when you have a incredibly tight schedule pressing you from all sides throughout the shoot. That being said, it would always, one always wants an extra day here or there, and sometimes you do lose things because you just don't have the time. But listen, you make the best of what you're given, and hopefully you aspire to achieve what you set out to make.
Yeah, and Dylan, you have on the 27th. I believe it's at 5:00 at the Sunscreen Film Festival. You're premiering a series that you created, directed, wrote, called Sugar. What inspired this?
I had gone down to Ringling, which is such a great place, and I had met David Shapiro, who become a great friend, and I always had this idea of, I'm always creating things. When I'm not working as an actor, I'm writing. I just sold the show to ITV about a race car driver, and I wrote this show. I've always been fascinated. You know the movie Hardcore, the George C. Scott movie?
I love that movie. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I was always struck by that movie as a kid, and the idea of the runaway girl always is played in my psyche somewhere. Maybe because I have two daughters, but this idea of the runaway girl was something I was always interested in. So I brought this idea of a runaway girl, and I set it in Sarasota, in South Florida. The idea of also South Florida is a whole different world from the rest of the United States as well. So I wanted to set it there. I wanted to use the students, to have them really for them to take this show. I like you said, I wrote and directed it, but I wanted to give it to them so they could have an experience of what it would be like to write a show, to continue a show in a web platform. So I really, kind of molded it to Ringling, and came up with this idea and had fun shooting it. We shot it, I think 3 or 4 days down in Sarasota, and we cast great people. And it was just really fun, and now we have the support of Kevin Smith on his Smodcast network, and the Wayne Foundation came on board for sex trafficking, who've been great friends of ours, and you can watch it April 28th at sugarsmodcast.com, and I'm really intrigued by it, where it's going to go, where the students are going to let it go, what's going to happen to this girl. Because it was important for me to have a young girl be empowered and not be, destroyed by the world. So it's really a story of empowerment.
Well, it's interesting because the episode I watched ran about nine minutes. Is that the typical, pilot, or
right?
They not?
No,
okay.
I think it's going to be. It'll probably run. People don't have the attention span, especially on the web, so they can probably handle 3 minutes, 5 minutes at the most. But the the first episode was 10 or 9 because I wanted to sort of like set the tone.
Right. Yeah, it's so extraordinary that you mentioned Paul Schrader, because as I was watching it, I was thinking about Paul Schrader. I interviewed him a couple of years ago, and I desperately wanted to talk to him about Hardcore because
it's so
I
funny
adore
because
that movie.
We follow each other on Facebook, and I love to just hear his comments about the world. I mean, he's so unique.
Very much so. And he actually made a statement to us where he said, look, we don't know what movies are now. They could be 2 hours. They could be 5 minutes. It's
True.
kind of like it's a brave new world. So that's the first thought that came into my head, that you're playing into that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So tell me about. So this would be the first time you've shown Sugar to a general audience?
That's right. Yeah.
Wow.
So that's exciting.
And
to have
and meanwhile,
Blind and Sugar there at the same time is really so fortuitous, because that obviously that never happened. So I'm so excited to talk about both and going down to Florida.
Absolutely. And Blind has played for a festival audience. I saw some clips of the Woodstock Film Fest premiere.
That's right. How many festivals has it been in, Michael?
It's been in 2 festivals. It opened Woodstock, and then we had an opening night at the Bahamas Film Festival.
Right.
And Sunscreen will be the third opening feature-length festival for the film.
And it's coming out this summer. Is that correct?
It's the film is coming out July 14th.
July 14th. How many theaters?
They're doing 10 major markets initially.
Oh, great.
So it'll get to the big cities and then hopefully expand from there.
Fantastic.
Well, this is the last question I have for you guys. You've been so generous with your time. But in terms of festivals and premiering your work at festivals, as both a director and an actor for both of you, you're intimately involved in the creation of it, but what do you learn about your movie when you see it through the eyes of an audience for the first time?
You want to answer that one first, Dylan?
No, you go ahead.
All right.
You're the director.
Well, I think with any creative endeavor, you start it for egoistic reasons, and then you end up doing it for altruistic reasons, and that is, you're ultimately making it for an audience. Whether it's film or writing a book or a painting, for that matter. And so for me, it's I'm sort of endlessly fascinated with audience reactions. Sometimes there's scenes to me very personally that are not funny at all, and yet provoke a sense of laughter, or the opposite. Where I find a line that I wrote or oversaw the writing of, where I was almost certain that it would get a reaction, yet it doesn't, because people are sort of involved in that emotional point in the story where they're just not motivated to find laughter in that scene. Which is not a bad thing at all. It's just always amazing to see how an audience interprets your film as you're watching it, and as you made it with a certain intent in mind. So I obviously it's festivals are often very pleasurable experiences for the filmmaker, because you have a receptive audience, and the movie's half good. Usually the response will be positive.
Yeah. The thing about Michael is that he's a romantic, and he has made a romantic movie in a time when there are no more romantic movies. They're sort of like, people don't make romantic movies anymore. They make silly comedies, but they don't make romantic movies. And this truly is a romantic movie. There is again, it harkens back to an older time when people did kind of believe in romance, and they kind of believed in love. Mm-hmm. And that's what I really like about the movie, is that there's a real chance for love in this movie. It's funny that I'm saying that because my character is trying to destroy that as much as he can, but the fact that that Alec and Camille, end up together is such a beautiful thing in this movie. That really struck me the most, is that these two people were meant to be together, and Michael was the perfect director to sort of carry that message. So I appreciate that about the movie a lot, is that it just, it gives us hope for romance.
Yeah, it's look, it is an old-fashioned love story. Dylan's absolutely right, and it is a film about second acts, no matter how old you are, and I think my hope is that certain people will respond to it, on that level, because I do think it speaks to certainly an older demographic, but there's enough there to appeal to a younger audience too, and. Look, hopefully people will buy tickets and go see it. That's my dream.
Well, and there's so much kind of cynicism out there today, and movies changed my life, and movies to a large extent deepened my sense of empathy. I think art in general can do that. So when I hear you talking about making a true romance, and Dylan, you making something about empowerment, female empowerment. I mean, those are powerful, and those are needed today, really.
Yeah, they really are. Because you're right, we're living in such cynical times, such dark times. So anytime we get a relief from that is a good thing.
Yeah. Now more so than ever, for sure.